What's your creative process like when you're developing a new comic book?
Again, it's very specific to the creator, right? Every great comic book, I feel, just came full-blown out of the mind of whether it's a writer or an artist, and some people are writer/artists. They're few and far between, really, but it's really just your vision. It's kind of probably the same thing as writing a prose novel. You have to have the confidence in your idea. You have to have a true passion and belief in that what you write must get down on paper or electronically now. And I couldn't really give you a roadmap as to how I do it. A lot of stuff comes to you in dreams. A lot of people in the creative process say their subconscious is, preeminent, and it probably is, yeah.
Do you use the same formula for every comic book?
No, every comic book has its own internal formula. I've created, in addition to Zen, I've done other books that I've created, like the frickin' butt-kickin' zombie ants, all right, which couldn't be further from Zen or some of the other books I've created over the years. Everything is just, you get an idea, and so this will be a fun thing to do, and maybe it's an over-the-top comedy like the frickin' butt-kickin' zombie ants. That book came about because I had been reading on the internet that zombie ants are real. These are ants who get infected by a parasite, and it ultimately turns them into zombies and kills them, okay? So I'm reading this on the internet, zombie ants, and I say, how can this not be a comic book? So I had to add frickin' butt kicking to it. And, and that couldn't be further from Zen, okay? So, very dissimilar ideas. And I've also written adaptations of classics, like I wrote a Beowulf graphic novel. I've written a Christmas Carol graphic novel. Those two were published not by my U.S. publisher of like Zen and the Zombie Ants, which is First Comics, but they're published by a British publisher called Marcosia. And the reason I have a relationship with Marcosia was I lived for the entire year of 2007 in London and met the publisher, a great guy, Harry Marcos. And when I met Harry over lunch and told him I wanted to write the Beowulf graphic novel, he snickered a little bit, said, Steve, well, really, this is kind of European stuff, epic poem, you do Zen comic books. I said, Harry, I was an English major in college, and my favorite epic poem was Beowulf, but not just Beowulf, the Seamus Heaney translation of the poem. So, I was kind of forceful, and he was impressed with that, and he let me do it, and it has become a perennial seller for Marcosia since it came out, like, 15 years ago, something like that. So yeah, all kinds of different things. I like to do literary stuff. I like to do wild, crazy stuff like the zombie ants. And of course, Zen is my mainstay.
How much description do you write when you're starting a comic?
Very little. I don't want to hamstring the artist. To me, the artist is the director of the comic book or graphic novel. I'm just the lowly writer who come up with the script, right? But I don't want to tell the artist how to do everything, what angles to take, in what background to incorporate it. I really want because I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some of the top artists in the industry for a long time now, and I know when you got somebody who's that talented, you don't want to hamstring them. It's just like, they don't want to write, they don't want to do my job, which is write, and I don't want to do their job, which is draw. So my scripts are very sparse. I want the artist to have pretty much free reign.
And is that some advice you would give to someone just starting in comics if they are writing them and they're looking for an illustrator? Don't try to micromanage them too much.
Well, I would give that advice, but I don't know how many people will take it. Again, it's like everybody has their own kind of agenda based upon their experience. So it would be wrong for me to just say, do it that way. They got to do it their way, and, far be it from me to tell them how to do it.
How do you keep the reader turning the page?
Well, that's good storytelling. It's the storytelling, the characterization, the compelling plot. It's kind of like a movie in terms of 3 acts, beginning, middle, and end, right? The beginning sets the story up, and then there's the inciting incident at the end of the first act where something turns around or compels the hero to travel a certain path, right? And then the middle of the story, or the second act, is all the complications and the different characters that are encountered in it. And then, of course, the third act is how it all gets resolved. So it's kind of like that. I'm a big fan of the book, The Writer's Journey by Vogler. And that, if you read that book, you can write comics, you can write graphic novels, you can write movies. That to me is like, no better blueprint. The other way you keep the reader turning the page is with great artwork. And that's why in so many cases the artist is the superstar of the comic book field. Not that because there have been superstar writers like Neil Gaiman, of course, right? And many others. But by and large, comics are a visual medium. So that's why the artists are so preeminent.
Where do you see some of the comics fall short? Is it in the second act, or do you not really, you think it's different? With films, people say, oh, it lagged here, whatever, but with comics, because it's so visual and we come to it because we love the art in most cases, is that not an issue?
Well, the comic book industry and the world of comic books is an amazing world unto itself. So what happens is artists and writers will get a hardcore of fans who will buy virtually anything, budget allowing, that their favorite writers and artists put out. And fans are very forgiving. If they love your work, they'll know that on occasion, you're going to have something that's kind of mediocre, because nobody does excellent stuff all the time, right? So, so whether a fan is following an artist or a writer, if they're a fan, they're going to stick with you unless you do something egregious, which hopefully, I will not do.
We had another viewer write in with a question. This is from Mike Antos, and his question is, how do you end a story that is designed to be serialized?
One of the great things about comics and graphic novels is that someone can die, like Superman. There was the death of Superman. But guess what? A couple issues later, he was back, right? I even did a story called Doomsday for Zen. It was my reaction to the death of Superman, because I knew he was going to come back. You don't kill off Superman, your golden goose, as it were. So the reason I called it Doomsday for Zen was that the name of the bad guy who killed Superman was Doomsday, right? So I have in my story, Doomsday for Zen, Zen is killed. But then, without giving too much away, he comes back to life at the end of the story. That book has sold not only as a, in this case, black and white book that Dan did this intricate pen and ink work for, but it has not only sold in that format, but it was so popular, we turned it into a 3D book. Dan learned how to do 3D. It took him a long time, but I kept telling him, stick with it, Dan, stick with it. And this ends up being one of the best looking, impactful 3D comic books that I've ever seen. And it has a cover, both in the original black and white version and the 3D version, covered by a well-known comic book artist, Sam Keith, who worked on, Wolverine for Marvel and has worked on Batman for DC and had his own creation called The Max, right? So that book, between the great cover art by Sam Keith and Dan's amazing, now 3D inside it, that sells to this day out at all of the comic book conventions, including Comic-Con in San Diego. And what's great is, even though Zen dies in it, it's not what I would call a violent or bloody, gory comic. And kids, of course, also love 3D. So many kids have seen Zen die and come back to life in 3D.
And do you need the 3D glasses?
Yes, the book is sold with the 3D, the old style blue and red lenses.